How much does it cost to buy a new build house? Not the purchase price, because you can get a mortgage. How much cash in the bank do you need to buy a house? This is how much it cost me. What is happening, folks? My name is Robbie, and today I'm going to tell you exactly how much it cost me and my fiance to buy our new build home in 2021. So one of the reasons that I started this channel is that when I was younger, I wanted to understand how money works, how people made money, what they spent their money on, how to invest money. But for some reason, particularly in Britain, it's a very personal thing and it's not something people like to talk about openly. They don't want to talk about how much something cost. They don't want to talk about how much money something made them. They don't want to talk about how much they invest in certain things. A lot of people just don't like to discuss money. They think it's rude or it's not very polite, which is fine. But I'm of the opinion that these things are important and they should be talked about, particularly in the instance of young people. A lot of young people might want to know the answers to these questions, but they're too afraid to ask. They're maybe not confident enough. They don't want to be rude. But in reality, they're itching to know, how much does it actually cost to buy a house? How much does it cost to finance a car? Things like that. I think it's important to be talked about if someone is comfortable talking about that. In this case, I am. So as a teenager, I didn't know what a mortgage was. I didn't understand the concept of buying a house. I just thought everyone rented from the council, because houses are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds. And no one I knew had that kind of money in the bank. Not that I knew of anyway. No one told me how these things work, and I sort of had to figure it out for myself. And it wasn't until I was in a position to buy my own property that I realised how expensive these things can be. And just a little side note here, I've just mentioned that I didn't know what a mortgage was. I worked in a mortgage department in a bank for my first proper full-time job when I was 18. I didn't even know what a mortgage was when I went for the interview, and it took me 2 weeks to figure out what a mortgage was. 2 weeks of training to figure out what a mortgage was. Had no idea. So that's why I think a video like this might be important. I was too afraid to ask anyone at the bank what a mortgage was, because I probably would have been sacked. Why would you hire someone in a mortgage department that doesn't know what a mortgage is or how it works? So I'll just briefly explain how a mortgage works for those that don't understand, or like me, maybe too embarrassed to ask someone. I know some people can feel a bit foolish asking questions about things they don't know, but that's really the only way to learn. So let's pick a round number for simplicity's sake. You've found a house on Rightmove that you like. You've inquired with the estate agent and you've booked a viewing, and you've also requested a copy of the home report. So this is a document produced by a chartered surveyor, and that basically gives you all the information on the house. When it was built, if the property has any issues, like maybe a new boiler, damp in the property for example. But more importantly for this example, the home report tells us what the market value is for the property. So the home report tells us that this property you've seen on Rightmove is worth £100,000. And the owner has told you that they're happy to sell it for home report value at 100,000. But then you log into your online banking and you know fine well there is not 6 figures in there. So you go to the bank and you ask them if they can loan you the money to buy that house. This is the mortgage, and it works in the same way as any other bank loan really. The bank will ask you for what feels like a million details about yourself: pay slips, tax returns, how much do you spend on car finance, on phone contracts, what day of the week was your great granddad born. They then take all of this information and they run a credit check on you. This is just to make sure that you've been paying your bills on time, there's no missed payments, and you're generally a safe investment for them to loan money to. The riskier they deem you based on all this information you've given them, the higher interest you'll have to pay. And they also might ask you for a larger deposit if they think you're a bit riskier than average. Once they've collated all of this information, they'll give you a decision in principle, which basically tells you the amount of money that the bank are willing to loan you against the property. So the bank comes back to you and tells you they're willing to lend you £90,000 in a mortgage. That means with a 10% deposit of £10,000, you can buy the property that you found on Rightmove for 100 grand. The seller accepts your offer of £100,000. You send your £10,000 to your solicitor. The bank sends the other £90,000 to the solicitor, and then they make the payment in full to the seller. There are obviously a few more steps involved here, but this is just a basic rundown. So you now own that property, and you're locked into making payments to the bank for 25, maybe 30 years. So that's how a mortgage works in a nutshell. You borrow money from the bank to buy the house, and then you pay the money back to the bank over a long period of time. I hope I made that simple enough to understand. Now, a common mistake I have noticed, and I experienced it myself as well, is people underestimate the associated costs with buying a house. Primarily things like legal costs. So your solicitor obviously takes payment from you to process this transaction, and I'm sure you're aware to some degree, solicitors, lawyers, they're not cheap. There can also be tax in the form of stamp duty, depending on your circumstances, the value of the property that you're buying, and there also isn't a specific rule on how much money you should be putting down as a deposit. A general rule of thumb that a lot of people use is to aim for 10%, but the bigger the deposit you put down means the lower the monthly payments might be. A larger deposit can also give you a few more options in terms of borrowing. So you putting down a 20% deposit as opposed to a 10% deposit means the bank might offer you a slightly lower interest rate, meaning you're paying a lot less over the term of the mortgage. So the amount of variables involved in buying a house is huge. That's why I thought rather than giving hypothetical numbers and just pulling things out of thin air, I would just make a video breaking down the costs of how much it cost me to buy this house that I'm sitting in just now. So I'll start from the beginning. Last year, me and my fiance decided that we wanted to buy a house together because previously I had owned my own flat that she would come and stay at, but now we wanted to move on and own something together. We looked at buying an older property which maybe needed some work, or even a property that was ready to move in. But we found that most properties were going to a closing date, meaning that everyone has to submit an offer by a certain date. On that closing date, the seller would then be presented with all the offers, and then they would just choose the winning bid on the day. This can typically mean that people will offer over home report to make sure that they can secure the property, because they don't know how much other people have offered. Good for the seller, not so good for the buyer. So it was either that or properties were just being sold very quickly over home report without even going to a closing date. So the market was very competitive, and it still is very competitive at the minute. And this is another thing that I don't think first time home buyers often know about home reports. The bank will only lend you money based on the home report value of the property. So if you wanted to offer £110,000 on a £100,000 property, you'd have to pay your 10% deposit of £10,000. That's based on the home report. But then that additional £10,000 over the home report would have to all come out of your pocket, meaning you would have to put down £20,000 because you offered over home report. So after a while we decided we didn't want to pay over home report, because at that point you're essentially paying more than the house is worth. So the next logical option was a new build. So new builds can often get a bad rap, particularly from people of an older generation than me, maybe people in their 50s and 60s, in my experience anyway. The bedrooms in new build houses can typically be smaller than older houses. The build quality can sometimes be a bit rubbish. If you pause this video and Google the names of some well-known house building companies, I'm pretty sure you'll find some negative reviews relatively quickly. But we had a friend who had bought a new build house, and we were both impressed by the size of the house, the size of the rooms, the build quality, so we decided we would go and view the show home. And pretty shortly after, I was stung for £500 for a deposit. So this £500 is a deposit for the plot, and this goes towards the final price of the house. So we paid that £500 to secure our house, then we had to go and get the mortgage sorted out. I'll spare you the details of the full buy-in process because it's extremely dull and I've pretty much went over it already anyway. The property that we ended up buying was a 3-bed semi-detached house for £216,550. We wanted to put down a 15% deposit, which is £32,482.50. There were two reasons why we put down a 15% deposit. One is that my credit score was relatively bad a few years ago. I defaulted on a phone bill when I was like 20, 21. That's a story for another day. Stupid mistake when I was young. But since then my credit score has improved quite a lot, but it isn't quite perfect yet. So the 15% deposit gave us more options for lenders. The other reason is this house isn't an investment property. It's a property that we bought to live in, so we don't mind having some extra money tied up in it. A lot of people talk about putting as little money as possible into buying your own home, so you can use the rest of your money to go and invest in other properties, and then whenever possible pull out more equity through refinances to invest that money as well. But for the two of us, we're quite happy with the extra security of having a little more equity in our house. So we're now at £32,982.50. In the process of getting our mortgage, we used an independent mortgage broker. The reason that we used an independent broker is because he has access to the whole of the market. He doesn't work for Bank of Scotland, for example. He can find us the best deals on the market from various different lenders. In total, after finding us the mortgage and completing the whole process, he was paid £500. So we're now sitting at £33,482.50. To buy a house, as mentioned before, you also need a solicitor to process the transaction. This cost us a flat £1,000, which in my experience is about the going rate. We're up to £34,482.50. But then of course we wanted to add one or two extras to the house. So we got some upgraded cupboard doors in the kitchen, and we also got a nice granite sink. On top of that, we decided it would be a good idea to get an electric shower in the main bathroom, as well as the shower in the ensuite bathroom. Just in case anything goes wrong with the boiler, which has happened in previous properties I've lived in, the electric shower means you still have hot water. I know a lot of people talk about going for cold showers in the morning and all the benefits of it. Apparently, it's not my scene. I like a hot shower. So these three extras came at a cost of £2,540. We're now at £37,022.50. Now I've had a quick skim through my bank statements and nothing else stood out to me directly related to buying the house. Obviously there are things like curtains, carpets, blinds, furniture, but as far as actually purchasing the house, there was only one person left to pay, the tax man. So we had to pay two different forms of tax when buying our house. The first was land and building transaction tax, often referred to as stamp duty, and that came to £1,431. But the second was the big hitter. Because I hadn't sold my previous property that I lived in before buying the new one, I had to pay what's called additional dwelling supplement. And this is what anyone who's buying a second home needs to pay. This second home could be anything. It could be a holiday home, somewhere nice on the coast. It could be a flat for your son or daughter to live in while they're at university. It could be a buy-to-let investment. In my case, it was purely because I owned my previous flat whilst purchasing this house. So this house technically was my second home. So additional dwelling supplement is a flat 4% of the purchase price of the new home. So that equated to £8,662. I know, £8,662 gone for nothing. Didn't get anything for that money. So these two tax payments brought the total money required to buy this house to £47,115.50. And that's the total that me and my fiance had to pay to buy our house. Now tallying that up, I know that does seem like quite a lot of money. Particularly if you're a young person looking to get on the property ladder, that number can seem a little bit daunting. I know that's how I would have felt if I heard that number when I was a first time buyer. In terms of percentage for the property, it's 21.75%, but there are a few reasons for this and I'm not here to try and scare people away from buying a property. Realistically, it sounds worse than it actually is. First of all, we put down a 15% deposit as opposed to the standard 10% that people typically like to put down, or even 5% that some banks offer to first time buyers. Although 95% mortgages are less common than they used to be, so I've been told at least. This was a personal choice of ours, so putting down a 15% deposit is not a necessity. A lot of banks will take less than 15%. There's the extra shower and the upgrades to the kitchen, not necessary. There was already a bath in our main bathroom and a shower in our ensuite. We didn't need the second shower, we just thought it would be handy to get put in place just now, rather than having to run cables and pipes, new tiles and all the other costs that come along with installing a new shower. We thought we might as well just get it done at the beginning and be done with it. But the biggest mention here has to be the additional dwelling supplement. If you're watching this as a first time buyer, you don't need to pay additional dwelling supplement because you don't have another house. And I'm able to claim that back as long as I sell my old flat within 18 months of buying this new house, which I have since sold. Granted, I did have to have that money up front, but the taxman's essentially just holding on to that money to then give me it back. So if I was to take out those few upgrades, exclude the additional dwelling supplement and drop the deposit to 10% as opposed to 15%, it would have actually only came to £25,086. Now I know that's still a lot of money, but it's a decent chunk less than £47,000. And another point to make is, if you're watching this as a first time buyer, chances are you're not going to buy a 3-bedroom house. You might, but it's unlikely. You might buy a flat for £100,000, so your 10% deposit's only £10,000 as opposed to £20,000 or £30,000 for a bigger house. So obviously all these costs are extremely variable depending on where you live, how much you're willing to put down as a deposit, how much money you make. Are you buying it yourself? Are you buying it with your partner? Are you buying it with a friend? Are your parents going to be a guarantor? There's so many variables. But that's how much we spent on buying our new build home in 2021. And let me just make this point as well. I don't want anyone thinking this is some sort of flex or look at my house type of video. I did actually make a video giving a little tour around the house. I'll put that in the description in case you're interested. But I like making videos about finance and investing, and I thought it might be a good video to give people a real example of how much it costs to buy a house, rather than the typical thing of looking at mortgage calculators, how much is it going to cost me per month, how much of a deposit roughly will the bank take. I try to be as transparent as I can on here, and I thought it was a worthwhile topic to talk about. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and I hope that maybe someone takes something useful from it, and I hope that my fiance doesn't kill me for revealing how much our house costs, because I don't know if she wants me to tell people that or not. I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Thank you as always for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this, and consider subscribing to the channel. I post a new video every week, typically related to investing and finance, so if that's what you're interested in, click the red button and I'll see you next week. Take it easy.